Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 22nd Annual James B. Hunter Award Ceremony and our first ever virtual award ceremony. So bear with us as we work our way through the technology here. My name is Helen Conley. I am honored to be serving this year as the chair of the Human Rights Commission. And on behalf of the entire Human Rights Commission, the Office of Human Rights, and the County Board, we all want to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you who are joining us from near and from afar in what is undoubtedly one of the best evenings of the year. Since 1999, the Human Rights Commission has been recognizing outstanding achievement in the area of human rights and diversity here in our county, in Arlington, by individuals, by community groups, nonprofit organizations, and businesses. Tonight's prestigious awards are named for the late James B. Hunter III, a former Arlington County board member and chair who dedicated much of his life to serving those without equal access to government. The James B. Hunter Awards was established the year following his death to honor those individuals, community groups, nonprofit organizations, and businesses that demonstrate a commitment to the promotion of cultural diversity and equal rights for all residents of Arlington County. Tonight, you will, as I have had, the privilege to learn about incredible work that has been happening right here in our community every day by some really outstanding organizations and individuals. Before we get to meet our awardees and learn more about that outstanding work that folks are doing, please bear with me and permit me to make some initial introductions. If we were all together in a room, I would ask these folks to stand up and be recognized, but given our technology limitations, I'm just going to recognize folks by their name. Let me first take a moment to recognize my fellow human rights commissioners. This is an outstanding team of people who volunteer their time and their energy to serve James B. Hunter's legacy every day. Let me actually call them out and honor them by name. Jose Quinones is the vice chair of the commission this year, serving with me. Roland Watkins is our former chair. Kylie Tibbetts, our former vice chair. Sukari Pinnock Fitz, Susie Lee, Carol Lieber, Sean Pierce, Walter Charles Sargent, Stephen Krieger, Whitney Kernoodle, and Bill Rice. Our work as a commission would not be possible without the tireless efforts of the staff of the Office of Human Rights, led by the outstanding executive director, Gurjeet Chima. And we'll hear from Gurjeet shortly about all of the incredible work her office is doing every day. I'm also delighted to recognize our county board member, Matt DeFerenti, who has joined us tonight to celebrate and recognize the recipients of the awards. And likewise, we'll get to hear from Matt this evening in just a bit. Our fabulous keynote speaker, Elita Black, is here. Elita served as special counsel and historian to former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton, and despite her incredibly busy schedule, has graciously agreed to share her insights with us tonight. And we'll all have the privilege of hearing from her shortly, and I'm particularly excited to hear what she has to say. And lastly, I'm absolutely thrilled to recognize the family of James B. Hunter, many of whom I understand are watching us on Facebook and YouTube this evening. But in particular, I'd like to recognize James B. Hunter's son, Jamie, who is here tonight and is prepared to share a few words about his dad and his dad's legacy. So with that, Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Helen, very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And on behalf of my family, thank you all so much for continuing this tradition of honoring those involved in the struggle to protect human rights in my dad's name. I think Dad would have been honored, humbled, and probably a little bit embarrassed. And he would have been so proud of all the recipients tonight that are carrying on the fight. Just on a personal level, it's hard for me to believe that this is the 22nd version of this event and that Dad has been gone for that long. Tomorrow is actually his birthday, and he only would have been 82 years old. This ceremony is actually about the most fitting birthday present that I can think of for him. When I was born, we lived in sunny Southern California. Dad was stationed there in the Marines, actually. And as a side note, I believe we have a couple of Marines among the recipients tonight. And I just want to say Semper Fi. Not a Marine, but a Marine kid for sure. But even though the California life seemed pretty good to me at the time, Dad was born and raised in Arlington, and home was calling strongly to him. So we ended up moving to Arlington when my brother and I were very young. Dad eventually left the Marines, joined a small retirement benefits business, and actually became very active in our church and in our community. Simply put, Dad was wired to help other people. His father, Paul Hunter, my granddad, was the first full-time minister of our church in Arlington, Rock Spring, and along with my grandmother, Leon, had led the fight to integrate the Arlington County Public Schools back in the 1950s. Their activist ministry and desire to improve our community and simply help others had passed on to Dad in a big way. Dad's interests were many, as many of you know: Committee of 100, affordable housing, political campaigns, active at church, same-sex rights, and on and on. As a kid, it sometimes seemed to me like he put more time into his various civic passions than into his actual full-time job. I remember countless times going with him to knock on doors, to campaign for friends running for office, what seemed like never-ending committee meetings, and even the occasional march for a good cause. We marched all the way to DC to protest I-66 back in the day, shouting 2468, we don't want no interstate. And now, of course, when I go back, I think, when are they going to widen this thing? But Dad wasn't just a civic activist. He truly was cut from a different cloth. In some ways, he was the antithesis of some modern politicians. Instead of seeking the limelight, he was happiest working on others' campaigns and helping people behind the scenes. He lived and breathed honor and integrity every day. He was much more a man of action than of words. When he first ran for office, I remember him telling his campaign workers that it didn't matter if he won or lost. I think the entire staff issued a collective groan at that. I guess he was a little old school, but if so, I really like the old school. During the Southeast Asian refugee crisis in the 1970s, Dad decided to take in a refugee family of 4 from Laos, which actually displaced me from my room at the time. They ended up with us for a few weeks until they could find more permanent housing nearby, and then we became their mentor family and helped them acclimate to the new country. When they told us that their niece Tampan was also on her way to the US and needed a place to stay, Mom and Dad didn't hesitate. Although they already had 3 kids of their own and our family budget was pretty tight, they welcomed her with open arms, made her part of our family, and treated her as their own daughter, eventually putting her through college. Their generosity and warm-heartedness made an incredible difference in my sister's life. When it came right down to it, Dad genuinely saw everyone as equal. I remember coming home from college on Christmas Eve and Dad holding a party for what seemed like the entire gay community in Arlington to make sure they felt welcomed in our community. Dad was a believer in same-sex rights before it was a cool, trendy issue. During political campaigns in Arlington, it was customary to visit Black churches in South Arlington on Sundays, but Dad kept going after Election Day. When the ministers asked him why, he'd tell them that their services were just more fun. He founded the Arlington Housing Corporation to help lower-income people find affordable housing in our area. And he was just a downright decent person. I remember him getting cut off in traffic in DC one day and rolling down his window to say something to the offending driver. I remember thinking that I might hear like a few choice epithets or maybe even a 4-letter word. So Dad yells, "May the peace of Christ rule in your heart." I think the other driver was mostly just confused, but that was him in a nutshell. Dad ran for office a couple of times without success, but was finally elected to the Arlington County Board in 1990 at age 51, served for 7 years before retiring for health reasons in 1997. It seemed like Dad had found his true calling. When he talked about the work he was doing on the board, his face would just light up. For him, I really think it was a way just to help more people more effectively. It seemed like he gave the job every ounce of passion and energy that he had, treating what was a part-time job as a full-time one. I don't really think he even thought of it as a job. He simply received joy from helping others. All of the award recipients tonight are carrying on his legacy in your own ways, and I think my dad is up there with a huge smile on his face just thinking of all the good work you're doing. From all of the Hunter family, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your service to our community.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for bringing your father to life today, and happy birthday to him. I know I speak on behalf of our entire community when I assure you and your family that your father's legacy lives on in Arlington every day, certainly through the work of the Human Rights Commission. On that note, I'll turn it over to Gurjeet Cheema, Executive Director of the Office of Human Rights, to talk a little bit about her work.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you and welcome to all of you in virtual attendance today. Thank you to our speakers, our Human Rights Commissioners, Board Member Ferenti, County Manager Mark Schwartz, and most of all the awardees of tonight's prestigious honor. It is truly a delight to be here. We are delighted to have you here. My name, as Helen said, is Gurjeet Cheema. I'm the Executive Director of the Human Rights Commission and Assistant County Manager for Human Rights, EEO, and ADA. Our office also consists of our Investigations Lead, Anna Maynard, our Investigator, Patrick Coffey, and our Disability Resources Coordinator, Courtney Sales. While we do a lot of work in different areas, our primary responsibilities are investigations and accommodations. So we handle EEO and human rights investigations and accommodations both for the county's internal workforce and community at large. This is a free service we provide to our residents. As you may know, Arlington County's Human Rights Ordinance makes it unlawful to discriminate in employment, public accommodation, housing, commercial real estate, credit, and education based on race, national origin, color, marital status, sex, gender identity, religion, age, disability, sexual orientation, and familial status. The ordinance also prohibits retaliation against anyone who opposes discriminatory practices. If you would like more information, please visit our webpage for how you can contact us and the work we do. And we'd love to assist you with the complaint process and providing more information on the services we provide. Congratulations once again, and wishing you all a very warm and happy, safe holiday season.
Thank you so much, Gurjeet. Our community is so grateful for your service every day. I'll turn it over to Board Member Matt DeFerenti to share his congratulations and recognition to the awardees.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Jamie, for your remarks. We're lucky to have an outstanding chair of the commission. And Jamie, I will share this tidbit with you if you're still there. One of my campaign staff worked with your dad, and she didn't hesitate in saying he's the best public servant I've ever worked with. And from your remarks, it's so clear how public service is still with you. So it's an honor to be here for these awards. Gurjeet, we're very lucky to have you leading us. And I am going to speak from the heart a little bit about, just briefly about the awardees. I've done some research on some. I haven't been to the Advent Lutheran Church, and I certainly did do some research today, and I'm thrilled. Some churches that are in the Advent Lutheran tradition are integrally involved in Habitat for Humanity, for whom I worked. I'm thrilled that you're making a difference in our community. I do also want to just, there's several others, Les Garrison, if you know the work that you've described to be done on COVID vaccinations, there's nothing that's been more important to the last year when I've gotten to serve as chair than the health and safety of all of our residents. For the first 2 months, we were driving to get vaccine supply, and it was hard days and nights for me. For the next 2 or 3 months, getting thank yous from Arlingtonians. Those thank yous should all be ones that you hear, Les, for your work. OAR, I have been honored to learn from OAR by being in OAR's workspace before the pandemic, but also by the call for anti-racist work and racial justice that I hear both from Elizabeth as leader, but also the organization as a whole. And I will be clear that we have much more work to do. I'm a member of the NAACP, and certainly over the last year, I've been gratified to see the extraordinary leadership and the committees and all of the people who have responded transparently. I think we need to be concrete that the murder of George Floyd is a reckoning for all of us. And you have, as an organization, NAACP has helped lead us in that regard. I'll come back with just a brief comment there. I do want to get to our main speaker, who I know and is an outstanding leader. I'll just say Wilma Jones Kilgo has been a outstanding leader in our community for a long time. I'm so glad we're honoring Wilma, and I know that she will continue to keep me and the board accountable for the work we have left to do to honor our African American history and to make Arlington racially just in a much stronger way on a number of issues. So I will continue to celebrate your work, Wilma. Arlington Thrive and other organizations have just been central to when the pandemic started in March of 2020. We said, if you live in your home, we don't want you to be evicted. We want you to stay in your home. That's some of the most important work. There are other organizations that have made a huge difference on eviction prevention, but certainly Arlington Thrive and Andrew, through your leadership, but the entire group have been critical to that work. Last, I'll say, I'll be honest and I'll take a risk in saying that our work is just not done, and there is symbolic evidence of that. The NAACP's work and many others' work has touched housing and criminal justice reform, and those are critical pieces of work. But it's also the case that some of the work has been about changing our street name of Lee Highway to Langston and changing our logo. And I'm very proud we did both things this year. We'll say it's just a fact, and there's a learning lesson in this. As we were preparing the awards, the logos, some of the logos weren't the new logo. We're about what do we do to learn going forward. And I'll say on the board, there are practices that there are issues that we have not achieved yet. We have not moved forward on some aspects of racial justice and equity that we say we are that good, but we need to live up to being better every year. So I'll just conclude by saying, it's a thought that we all may know of, but certainly Parissa Dangani Tafti says it well. The work is to create the beloved community. That's what Dr. King mentions, and that's what we have to keep doing, and that's what these awards are all about. So excuse a little bit of emotion after a long day, and know that these awards mean so much to me and to us on the board. And I'm thrilled to send it back to Helen, to thank Carol, and I will be eager to listen to Elita Black, who is a hero I haven't talked with in over a year, but certainly someone I deeply admire. Thanks. Back to you, Helen.
Thank you so much, Matt. And indeed, there sure is much work to do, and what a thrill to be able to work on it all together with this outstanding group of people. I am delighted to introduce my fellow commissioner, Carol Lieber, to introduce our keynote speaker this evening. Carol.
You're muted, Carol.
So sorry. It's not often I'm muted, so sorry for that. It is indeed my privilege and honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Elita Black, PhD. She currently serves as the special advisor and historian to former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton. She is a visiting distinguished scholar at the Miller Center for the Study of the Presidency at UVA and is an affiliated scholar with the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. She founded and co-directs the Hillary Rodham Clinton Oral History Project, which is a policy-driven exploration of Clinton's service as the nation's 67th Secretary of State. Dr. Black is a leading expert on Eleanor Roosevelt and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. From 1999 until 2010, as a research professor of history and international affairs at the George Washington University, she conceptualized and directed the Eleanor Roosevelt Papers Project. A documentary collection of archival material gathered from 263 archives in the U.S. and abroad comprised this project, which is dedicated to preserving, teaching, and applying Eleanor Roosevelt's writings and discussions of human rights and democratic politics. Dr. Black has led workshops globally on human rights, on conflict resolution, and women's and girls' empowerment for the UN, the State Department, and for NGOs. Of note, in 2009, she conceptualized and led a symposium of 100 women leaders from 50 post-conflict nations for the State Department and the UN High Commission for Human Rights with the topic Courage to Lead. Dr. Black has also written and edited 10 books, as well as a variety of articles on women, politics, human rights policy, and has curated exhibits for presidential libraries, the UN, national historical sites, and private museums. She's also a scholar of First Ladies, a popular Smithsonian lecturer on the impact of these women have had on American life and politics. Elita has so many positions of distinction, but among them, she's also a trustee of the Franklin D. Roosevelt Presidential Library, a director of the Marjorie Kovler Center for the Survivors of Torture, and a director of the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Foundation. She holds a doctorate in recent U.S. political history from the George Washington University, and as you can imagine, has received numerous awards for her scholarship, teaching, and for her community service. We are so lucky to have this jewel in our community. She lives right here in Arlington, Virginia, with her wife, Judy Beck, and their 2 dogs, Hovey and Granger. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Elita Black, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Jesus, Carol, I just sent you the grant application. All you have to say is, I'm Elita, I do human rights, Eleanor and Hillary. I mean, but thank you. I'm really happy to be here for several reasons, one of which is the first commission that I ever served on for the county was this commission. So, it brings back good memories and, to be honest, a little frustration. And so what I'd like to do tonight, in my really short time, I swear to God, I'll be short and sweet and to the point, because I wanted to talk about 2 things. I want to talk about what human rights means, what the U.S. role in its creation and now in its reiterations are, and what the challenges are that we face as citizens, both of Arlington and of the world. And to do that, I'm gonna lovingly say that the title of this commission is misplaced, because we are a commission that we, meaning Elita, who used to be on it, and all of you who now are doing the work, is really focused on civil rights. It is not focused on human rights, because human rights are the intersection of political, civil, social, economic, and cultural rights. So when we talk about human rights, the right to employment, the right to be free of discrimination, the right to vote are essential human rights, but they are a tiny microcosm of what human rights means. Human rights means what we all share as human beings everywhere in the world. What are our fundamental characteristics, and what do we need to live a life? And what we need fundamentally, both Eleanor Roosevelt and Hillary Clinton, and I think Jim Hunter would say, is that we need the most fundamental human rights are the right to food and the right to shelter. It is an indivisible, inalienable right that we all share. And if, in fact, we call ourselves human rights advocates, we must deal with the right to food and nutrition to stay alive. We must deal with the concept of housing and shelter. Because, as Eleanor Roosevelt would say, not only are these essential, legally recognized, universally accepted, and negotiated values, but if we do not deal with them, hope fades, conflict erupts, biases increase, and we cannot build a community because a community will be divided into what we have and those who do not have it. And so what I would like to talk about today, in maybe the next 10 minutes, is my limited experience with Jim Hunter's work in this arena. I'm going to close this thing off my website so I can see your faces. And the challenge that citizens of Arlington, and especially the citizens who have received this extraordinary award for their heartfelt, bold, and brave leadership, how we need to intertwine their work. Because human rights is not just a civil execution. It is what we all share fundamentally. If you talk about housing and you don't talk about food, you don't get it. If you talk about voting rights and you don't talk about the right to worship and the right not to worship, you don't get it. If you talk about the right to citizenship without the right to travel and the right to earn an income, you don't get it. If you talk about civil and political rights and anti-discrimination for racial justice issues, for LGBTQ issues, for Afghan people that are coming into the United States, if you just look at it through that narrow lens, you are distorting what human rights means. And so the basic challenge that we all have as citizens, and that I have as a historian and as a human rights activist, is to help us find new vocabulary that can help us connect all of these in an indivisible and integral way. Because rights now have been bastardized. I have a right to speak my mind. I have a right to go into this store. I have a right to wear a t-shirt in my school. That is a diminution of what the concept of human rights means. And if you want a litany of this, there is no better litany than my boss's landmark address at the Beijing conference 26 years ago, when she goes through for women and declares that women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights once and for all. They are integral. If you want to look at it in terms of LGBTQ rights, fast forward to when Secretary Clinton was Secretary of State and uses that speech in the Beijing speech in a landmark speech in Geneva to talk about how LGBTQ rights are, in fact, human rights. So what we have here is we have in Arlington, and especially all of you on this commission, and God knows your awardees, you have a palpable, indivisible commitment to service and to addressing your particular area of expertise and concern. But what we all have a responsibility to do is to weave that narrative into a dialogue that encourages us to risk ourselves more and to begin to share our work in ways that show what it takes to be a community that is grounded in what Matt referred to as Dr. King's beloved community. For example, I am ecstatic that the state of Virginia, universities in the state of Virginia, both public and private, have responded more enthusiastically and with immediate effectiveness to a project that I am working on with the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security and Secretary Clinton to figure out how to welcome Afghan women who have fled Afghanistan with literally the clothes on their back. They have no laptops, they have no cell phones, they have no toothbrush, they have no blankets, they have no clothes, they have no sheets, they have no food. What they have is courage and a vision. So to deal with this, universities are working with them to bring them in as research fellows and welcome employees of their institutions. But what about the food? What about their family? What about their physical safety? What about a community that they engage in? Are they treated as other, or are they treated as one of us with common characteristics that we share? And what I so hope Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, because it is not just George Floyd, it is Breonna Taylor too. And it is a shorthand to use George Floyd for all of the other citizens in the United States, those who have legal status and those who are working toward legal status, or those who are still in the shadows fearing for their lives because they left starvation and persecution at home. We have to figure out how we can start public conversations about this in a way that gives us new language to show really how indivisible we are. And so what I would love to see this commission do is accept part of that responsibility. And I will help you in any way that I can to work on this. We have major trafficking centers in Arlington. I'm not talking about trafficking recovery centers. I'm like, people are trafficked here. We have lots of issues that we have to confront. And while I rejoice and celebrate with all I am the accomplishments of the commission and the extraordinary gifts and sacrifice and leadership and courage that our awardees have shown throughout, we have a boatload of work yet to do. And what we have to do is choose our vocabulary carefully, because civil and human rights rest on two pillars. They rest on civil and political rights. and social, economic, and cultural rights. And the more we divorce these two, the more problematic our approach becomes. And, you know, when Eleanor Roosevelt was tasked with chairing the committee to craft the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was supposed to be a legally binding document. And then there were 51 members of the United Nations who were engaged in this. 50 unanimously drafted her. The one nation that opposed her was us. And so what Eleanor had to do was not only keep all of the nations of the world engaged in this, who only had one thing in common, and that was, by God, we beat the Germans, to come up with a vision for what the world could be in the shadow of the two most horrific events of the last century, the Holocaust and the slaughter of the Second World War. And by why I mean the slaughter of the Second World War, I just don't mean military combat. I mean racial violence that escalated within the United States, anti-Semitism, anti-Catholic bias. You know, and so what Eleanor had to do was help the world find common vocabulary for what everybody shares. And then go to the United States, to Harry Truman and George Marshall, and say, listen, you know, I have come to understand that food and shelter are the fundamental human rights. And if the United States is not willing to accept economic, social, and cultural rights, I am resigning from this commission and holding a press conference and saying this is why. And in order to convince Truman and George Marshall of this, she went to a Republican. She went to John Foster Dulles, whom our airport is named for, you know, Mr. Conservative in the Senate, you know, who was the foreign policy advisor to every candidate who attacked her husband. But they found common ground in religion and in the reconciliation, the Fellowship for Reconciliation, and they joined ranks and went to Truman. And so bringing that in the shadow of this horror, puts even more pressure on us now, when we are all on trial to show what democracy means. And as we face this trial, regardless of what party we're in, regardless of who we voted for, regardless of whether, you know, where we live in Arlington, or how we worship or not worship, or who is our family, how we view family, we have a fundamental obligation as citizens and as human beings to figure out how to get out of these boxes and talk about human rights, not as taking from or giving to, but inextricably part of who we are as our cultural and communal DNA. And that's what all of the awardees have done. You know, and Jim Hunter fought for that with housing. He fought for that so that Judy and I could ultimately get married. He fought for food. But we must, when we talk about human rights, we have to make sure that we connect the dots. Otherwise, I think it's easy to get into a mine, not you. And, you know, if we cut the pie, that means there's less pie for me. And so that's the challenge that we all face. And that is the challenge that you guys suit up to address every day. It's the charge to the commission. And it is what Eleanor Roosevelt and my boss get up every day doing. And so with that, I am extraordinarily grateful for you all. And I am happy to see your faces. And just so you'll know, I'm going to try to stay on for the award ceremony as long as I can. But I have a speech that I'm recording for Africa tomorrow on a situation like this that's tied to the Declaration. So I may have to, when they reach out to me to say that the internet is up and stable, I gotta jump on to do it. So I salute you and am grateful for you all, and know that that I am your silent or sometimes too vocal partner in your initiatives. So take care, everybody, and I'm gonna turn me off. Okay.
Dr. Black, wow. Thank you so much for everything you have done, for carving up time out of your incredibly busy schedule to put such a fine point on what our charge is as a commission and challenge us with real precision as to what we can focus on in the next year. Absolutely outstanding. And believe me, you are never too vocal on our charge, and we will absolutely be calling upon you to assist in our work next year. So thank you for that kind offer. I am absolutely delighted that we have gotten to the point in our program where, as Dr. Black said, we get to celebrate the heartfelt, bold, and brave leadership of our awardees tonight. So with that, I am delighted to turn it over to my fellow commissioners to present the awards. Without further ado, Sean, take it away.
Thank you, Helen, and Dr. Black. Thank you for those great words of encouragement and motivation. So good evening, awardees, distinguished guests, and members of the Arlington community. Tonight, I have the distinct honor of introducing Advent Lutheran Church and its pastor, Pastor Anna Anderson. Advent Lutheran is located in South Arlington and is one of the recipients of the 2021 James B. Hunter Award. Since opening its doors in 1951, Advent has donned the mantle of servant leadership and has strived to advance diversity and human rights in Arlington County. 70 years later, it continues to don the mantle of servant leadership and stands as a beacon of hope to those in need. Advent strives to protect and advance the rights of all humans and recognizes that through diversity, we are all better. Advent's commitment to human rights is evident through its actions and partnerships with Arlington County area nonprofit organizations. Whether it's hosting a food drive, most recently collecting over 700 pounds of food to ensure that families had food for the Thanksgiving table, working to end homelessness in Arlington County, or providing clothing and other essential needs to refugees, most recently collecting over 1,000 pounds of essential goods for Afghan refugees. Advent's commitment to human rights and diversity is reflected in its motto, welcoming, caring, serving. Now I am honored to introduce Pastor Anderson, who for the next few minutes will share more about Advent Lutheran's commitment to human rights and diversity in Arlington County. Pastor?
Thank you, Commissioner Pierce. It was delightful to have you and your fellow commissioner at Advent on Sunday morning to present our award. We were so happy to have you and to welcome you there. And we are delighted and honored that you should have nominated us for this award, this very prestigious award. We've been living through a time of fear for all of us, fear of catching this new disease and the fears we have for others, and the fears we have for the unknown future. We also daily deal with fears about how our past treatment by others portends future ill or unjust treatment and suffering. The antidote to fear, though, is courage, and hope gives us the courage to act in the face of fear. The mission of Advent Lutheran Church for the past 70 years has been to offer hope to those in our community. It begins with the offering of our property for community use. Our building is home to a number of support groups, and as an emergency haven for our neighborhood school. Our grounds have been maintained as a garden with a meditation labyrinth and seating available to the community all hours. We've also started a native plants garden for our neighbors to enjoy and to learn about biodiversity. These are avenues for nurturing hope in the gifts of nature. Inside, we've invested resources over the years in making our building environmentally responsible and accessible in order to be inclusive of all people, including such things as large print materials, bathrooms, and hallways. Reaching beyond our walls and into the community, we followed the passions of those Advent members in supporting their individual ministries. We have members whose passion is ex-offenders and who call us to work with OAR in Arlington and to help unshackle those who've paid their debt to society. Other members lead us in supporting A-SPAN, in providing lunches for street people, and in regular food collections for Arlington Food Assistance, and in support of the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. Most recently, we led our neighborhood in providing household supplies for the Afghan refugees being resettled in our area. All these ministries are conduits of hope for residents of this community. We offer hope to those beyond our Arlington neighborhood and our support through the larger Lutheran relief organizations to those in need in this metro area and around the world, supporting Lutheran social services, Lutheran immigration and refugee services, and Lutheran World Relief. And that hope, and our own hope in the goodness of God, gives us the courage to continue to serve the dignity and rights of all our neighbors. We've done this for 70 years under the leadership of many people who've come and gone, and currently under the leadership of our congregational president, Shelley Bennett. We have been able to provide service because of them and because of the many members and friends of this Advent faith community. All of them are grateful for this award from the Human Rights Commission, and we covet your prayers for this continued ministry. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Pastor Anderson, richly deserved. Turning it over to Jose now.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you for everyone that is participating, and congratulations to all receiving the award. Founded in 1974, OAR is a community-based nonprofit that has served Arlington County for more than 4 decades, providing reentry readiness programming to residents at the Arlington County Detention Facility, working with men and women returning to the community from incarceration, and offering alternative sentencing options through community service to youth and adults. Race equity is an authentic commitment to dismantling racism in Arlington flows through every aspect of how OAR operates, from service delivery to legislative advocacy to internal operations to community education and even fundraising strategy. As an economic and racial justice social agent myself, I have witnessed how OAR has emerged as an equity leader and a human rights warrior by embracing a culture of racial justice and ensuring inclusion as a central part of the DNA of the organization. These commitments are reflected in the way OAR carries out these principles in programming, policy, and practices, as well as in the way they engage with service participants who have been often denied the opportunity to restore dignity, rights, and a full community membership. Even as they meet the needs of the individuals with whom they work, OAR is also building a better future through comprehensive pursuit of justice. It is my great honor to present the J.B. Hunter Award on Human Rights to OAR, and a real pleasure to introduce to all of you Elizabeth Jones, OAR's Executive Director, a true justice warrior, to accept this award. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Muchísimas gracias, Jose. Thank you so much, everybody. We are thrilled on behalf of OAR. I'm here with my award, and I want to thank you so much. This means a lot to us at OAR, as you know, as Jose described us beautifully. We have been in service since 1974, and the goal for us is to not exist any longer. So we are a nonprofit that actually wants to go out of business, because that means that we will be able to hit the root cause of all of the trauma and sadness that many of our folks who are connected to the criminal legal system are experiencing. And so I hope that in 2024, when we hit 50, we won't hit any more 50 years after that. And I just wanted to, again, thank you all, tell you how grateful we are for your support, for everybody, all the work that you all are doing. Congratulate our fellow winners and runners up, etc. And thank you again for continuing to support such an amazing mission. Muchísimas gracias. Pura vida.
Congratulations, Elizabeth, and congratulations to OAR. And I suppose this is the first time we're sort of hoping for you to close down and no more 50 years, but congratulations again. Turning it over to you, Kylie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kylie Tibbetts. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Helen. I really appreciate. I am a fellow commissioner here in South Arlington. And before I introduce the next awardee, I would like to review for you one of the 10 principles of an organization called Burning Man that touches on human rights. One of the principles is our community is committed to a radically participatory ethic. We believe that transformative change, whether in the individual or in society, can occur only through the medium of deeply personal participation. We achieve being through doing. Everyone is invited to work. Everyone is invited to play. We make the world real through actions that open the heart. Now think about that. Think of a world where there were no boundaries or bias. Over the past week, I asked several of my family members and friends about what human rights means to them. Here are the few of their responses. A necessity for life's endurances. Freedom to live their life how they want to without fear or being harassed or killed. Radical inclusion. Respecting the rights and liberties of your neighbor. As I think about what James B. Hunter Human Rights Award is about, we must remember the small pockets of excellence all of our volunteers bring to the community for which they live and work in. This award is presented to those individuals and organizations that take human rights seriously in everything they do for the community. Our next Human Rights Award is presented to someone who emboldens these traits. Les Garrison organizes events and assumes responsibility for public welfare and endeavor to communicate civic responsibilities to participants. For example, from May 2020 to July 2021, Les led the Arlington CERT activation, or the Arlington Community Emergency Response Team, for preparing or activation of all but 2 days. CERT executed activations and prepared for 5 others which did not go to that activation. And as a result of Les's leadership, Arlington CERT contributed more than 3,500 hours of Arlington's fight against COVID. This commitment directly resulted in his dedication and commitment to protect human rights. Additionally, Les expanded the course of the Arlington CERT basic training by offering the first ever Spanish language community emergency response team volunteer training to our community. This course was conducted entirely in Spanish to best engaged members of the Latino community in emergency preparedness and response. In Arlington, for example, we have more than 15% who identify as Latino in this county alone. And we were asked as CERT members, the volunteers, to help lead and design and deliver targeted COVID-19 information and resources to Spanish-speaking residents to reduce the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on this community. Les led the charge with expanding training and conducting events to ensure more inclusion to citizens that do not speak English as their primary language. This Arlingtonian has been a civic leader in our community for many years. Not only is he a Marine, he has led our youth as Boy Scouts leader. He's led his neighborhood civic association, as well as the leading of the Arlington CERT, just to name a few. His volunteerism accounts for thousands of hours to his personal ambition to take care of his community. Examples of his leadership to CERT include coordinating hundreds of volunteers from across the region to participate in administrative role-playing scenarios and full-scale exercises at the Reagan National Airport and the Pentagon, preparing hundreds of citizens in the event that a life-threatening emergency were to happen, and to have them help themselves to take safety in a life-taking and simple actions immediately until emergency services can arrive with the CERT basic training skills that he taught, as well as the Unite Until Help Arrives class. He leads CERT to coordinate the ham radio teams, moulage teams, CERT basic training teams, and outreach and engagement programs. It takes many hardworking folks at many levels to form an active and well-trained CERT, and Les Garrison is the current organizer and the one who's a principal volunteer that advocates with the state and local governments for Arlington and the CERT program. It's important to note that the C in CERT stands for community, as Les once said. In Arlington, there are lots of CERT teammates who are not citizens of the US, but definitely members of the greater community, such as diplomats, international business people, and foreign students, people who just care about being prepared to help each other. Les represents a spirit of unity, sense of sacrifice, and unselfish pride in our county and in our country, and has become a common characteristic of his citizenry during this pandemic. Les, your service to our community is deeply appreciated and worthy of this recognition. And as a recipient of the James B. Hunter Human Rights Award, I'm honored to present it to you tonight. Les?
Yeah, thank you, Kylie. Okay, I am unmuted, so I should be coming through. Okay, great. Thank you very much. It is truly an honor for me to receive the James B. Hunter Award. I met Jim Hunter many years ago, and we talked Marine stuff, and we did the secret handshake, and he was a great man. And it is really an honor to be receiving this award. Before I go any further, I'd like you, please allow me to thank my wife, Ann, who sets a good example for me on how to be a volunteer and in a lot of other things. Okay, I'd love to go ahead and bask solo in the admiration of the millions of people that are gathered here for this online presentation. Is the president here? I thought he was going to be here. And I don't see him online. He'll be late. I'm sorry. Okay, but in these interesting and soul-trying times, to be honest, the fact is that this award belongs to all of my CERT teammates. Who have continued to serve in many capacities before and during the pandemic. Over 120 CERT teammates have directly supported the COVID effort, standing watches at the testing and vaccination sites. Within the limits of common sense, logic, and science, I know, who knew, many teammates have supported other ongoing efforts for the CERT at the same time. I've got to mention names. Mentioning names is important, although time limits the number of names that I can mention. First, I want to mention Herb, who has long since seen his 80th birthday, who was standing the early first shift at the Quincy Street test site in a blinding, wind-blown, cold rain. I have to mention Regal, Amanda, Chris the lawyer, and Chris not the lawyer, who showed up 50 times to climb the steps of the quarantine hotels to deliver food to the rooms of folks at such high risk of COVID who had no place else to go. This was, of course, before there was even a hint that the vaccine was close. Other testing sites, vaccination sites, and other duties covered by Sue and Alex and Annette and Betty and Chasta and Fatima and Tina and Dave and Amar and Dave and Dave. How many Daves do we have? And Kylie and Grace, et cetera, et cetera. So many volunteers giving of their own time. I got to mention Frank, who single-handedly has stood over 110 shifts and 330 hours of his own time to help Arlington County in the COVID effort. So to be redundant and to say again what I just said, and in fact to repeat myself, the point is the efforts for which this citation is written have been and continue to be a team effort. Kylie stole one of my favorite lines, that is to borrow from the font of wisdom that is Sesame Street, that C is for cookie, and it also stands for community. The Arlington Community Emergency Response Team is about supporting the whole community, not just citizens. E is for emergency. The CERT is trying to help our community prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies. Our response is based on the needs of the community as we see them and as ultimately determined by Arlington County Emergency Management, which is our county government sponsor. We work hand in glove with them. Finally, the word team. CERTs never work alone. Even if a CERT is standing a watch on their own, or they're working at a computer on their own, or they're making IDs or doing whatever, we all work as a team. We have training from the fire department, the police department, our own volunteers, FEMA, and others. We're activated at the request of emergency management. One CERT on an activation represents us all. So let me finish, and I know I'm under time because I practiced. Let me finish up by saying I'm not seeking to proselytize anybody here. I would just like to plagiarize some words of wisdom of great importance, which could be another certain motto. Isaiah heard the word of the Lord and said, "Here am I, send me." Thank you all very much.
Les, thank you so much for what you've done for our community, and congratulations from the commission. Carol?
Well, thank you so much. And congratulations to my friend Les also. And I just want to introduce to you now that our next awardee is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, a civil rights organization formed in 1909 as an interracial endeavor to advance justice for African Americans. It's the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. The NAACP Arlington branch was established in 1940 and works to disrupt inequity, dismantle racism, and accelerate change in key areas, including criminal justice, healthcare, education, climate, and the economy. The Arlington branch NAACP has been at the forefront of advancement of racial and economic justice and equality in Arlington for more than 8 decades. During a pandemic that shut down many businesses and operations, the NAACP more than rose to the challenge of meeting their mission, achieving some of the most noteworthy accomplishments of their stellar history. 4 of these efforts are of particular note. They were actually mentioned by our wonderful county chair, Matt DeFerenti, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the efforts. They brought to light the horrific living conditions of the Serrano affordable housing apartments in South Arlington, where residents were living in substandard conditions, units with air quality issues, mold, non-functioning heating and air conditioning, physical deterioration to interior walls, broken electrical receptacles and switches, broken laundry machines, widespread rodent infestations. The NAACP kept pressure on the Arlington County Board, the County Housing Division, and property managers to relocate residents and fix all issues. The Arlington NAACP has also been critical in seeking information and accountability surrounding the deaths of inmates in the Arlington County Detention Facility, where over the past 6 years, 6 inmates have died while in custody. The NAACP ensured that this issue was not brushed aside, and instead they have been joined by the Arlington County Civic Federation in their search for answers and accountability. And the healthcare provider that was at the center of many of these deaths has had their contract terminated. The Arlington branch NAACP also initiated efforts to better represent our community and to honor our history with a new logo, removing the stylized symbol of the Robert E. Lee Memorial Arlington House, seen by many as a painful representation of the history of slavery in the region. After extensive community engagement and partnering, a new logo was adopted by the county board in September 2021, which you should be seeing throughout this presentation. The branch was also instrumental in leading efforts changing the name of Route 29, which was previously named also after Confederate General Robert E. Lee, and it has been renamed in honor of John M. Langston, a Virginia abolitionist and the first Black congressman from our Commonwealth. The NAACP Arlington branch number 7047 and the many hardworking, passionate volunteers dedicated to its cause is a valued partner and advisor working with diverse communities, faith organizations, civic and nonprofit organizations collaborating as our county addresses our challenges for racial justice, for diversity and equality. It is indeed my extreme honor and privilege to present the James B. Hunter Award to the Arlington Branch NAACP, and accepting on behalf of the branch is current President Julius D. J.D. Spain Sr.
Wow. Can you hear me? I think we're good. Well, thank you, Carol, and thank you, Human Rights Commissioners, Chair Conley, and the nominator for recognizing the work of your Arlington Branch NAACP. And as president, I am glad to accept the James B. Hunter Award on behalf of our over 900 members. Where over the past 2 years, we have seen our membership grow from around 200 to 900 members. So that's well over 350%. But I also want to take a moment of privilege now, because y'all gave me 5 minutes, to thank a few members of the NAACP who, without them, this award would not be possible. So I'm going to name them. Kent Carter, Sharice Kearns, Michael Heminger, Wanda Younger, Karen Nightingale, Kelly Macbeth, Tim Dempsey, Detta Cassell, Jamie Abrams, Gabrielle Cantor, Megan Brew, Jill DeWitt, Simone Walker, Rosa Dunkley, Carolyn Kane, James Younger, Megan Raisnor, Dominique Jenkins, Shayla Smith, Peter Ravenhaven, Heather Jean Kelly, Keisha Tinsley, Matt Rogers, Brendan Meehan, Reverend Dr. Delisha Davis, Maya Jones, Adora Williams, Leah Evans, Marvin Nels, Susan Cunningham, Roy Alston, and my lovely wife of 29 years, who gives me the time to do this, Adriana Spain. Chair DeFerranti, I had to tweak my notes a little bit because I'm proud that at this moment, you took the time to show what leadership is all about. As leaders, you have to understand that all leaders make mistakes. To be human means to mess up occasionally, and we do that. But the difference between good leaders and great ones lie in how they handle those mistakes. You acknowledge the mistakes, learn from the mistakes, teach others your mistakes, and move on beyond your mistakes. So thank you for your words. As you heard earlier, our branch was founded in 1940 and worked as an all-volunteer organization to be change agents for peace. I and many others, we stand on the shoulders of individuals like our very first president, Esther Georgia Irving Cooper, and past presidents like Dr. Alfred O. Taylor Jr., as we continue to do this work today. Each of our elected leaders and members are dedicated and determined. They will not rest until justice is served in every corner of Arlington. So I must begin with the warm and hearty invitation for you to join and become an active member of our thriving organization. The NAACP is a multicultural and multi-generational organization actively working on many issues, including criminal justice reform, environmental and climate justice, economic welfare, education, labor and industry, and housing, and many others. Each of these issues is vital to the health and well-being of communities of color. For example, The NAACP, my friends, have always understood that voting rights and civic engagement are the portals of achieving all other rights that we champion. We are strictly a nonpartisan organization for this reason. Because we're fighting for life and death issues in our communities, we at the NAACP do not have the luxury of picking a political party to work with or a platform with which our goals most align. Instead, we work today as the NAACP has nationally for over 109 years. We knock on doors and we call and write to those in power, and we work tirelessly to champion our rights and our protections. You cannot pick up the paper today without the stinging realization that our basic systems of democracy are under threat from an onslaught of sources. This realization is not new to communities of color. Voter suppression and disenfranchisement are the histories of people of color in the United States. Many would say it's deja vu every day as we continue to fight back against voting restrictions designed to disenfranchise communities of color. Poll taxes and literacy tests of the Jim Crow era have resurfaced as strict voter ID laws, understaffing of polling sites, and misinformation campaigns continue today. You heard earlier about housing. Housing, my friends, is a human right, and it's enshrined in the International Covenant of the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And we must continue to hold local government accountable for housing promises. Education is a right, and we will continue to work to ensure that every disadvantaged student and student of color graduates ready for college or a career by ensuring access to great teaching, fair discipline, equitable resources, and challenging curriculum. And no one, I repeat, no one should die in jail because they too have rights. They have rights to medical care. They have rights to attention. So as I close, we at the NAACP will continue to fight with the tools we know: grassroots activism, organizing, and civic engagement from door to door and neighborhood to neighborhood. We are on a mission: civil rights and social justice for all, and to ensure a society in which all individuals, regardless of race, color, creed, or religion, have equal rights, and that no racial hatred or discrimination bears its ugly face. I'm going to leave you with this. A couple of words. Symbols matter, words matter, facts matters, and make no mistake about it, representation matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, JB. Congratulations, richly deserving for NAACP. Please know we are here to partner with you in the work you're doing. I'll turn it over now to Bill.
Thanks, Helen. Good evening, everyone. I'm honored now to introduce William Jones Kilgo, fourth generation Arlingtonian of the Halls Hill Highview Park community. Ms. Jones Kilgo is a community activist whose work has been felt across the Arlington community. She is currently serving her fourth term as president of the John M. Langston Citizen Association. She works as a top-performing corporate information technology sales director and as president of her own management consulting firm. In addition, she is a sought-after public speaker, a moderator for various events, a blogger, a TV host, and the author of 3 books, including the book, My Halls Hill Community, More Than a Neighborhood. And I haven't even gotten into her civic activism yet. Ms. Jones Kilgo attributes her civic activism to her parents and to other members of the Halls Hill community who are actively involved in the Citizens Association. She continues the important work of her parents, who knew that being civically and politically active was a key means for the Black community to receive improvements for the county. Ms. Jones Kilgo has served on various community committees and task forces. For instance, she participated in the planning of the Langston Brown Community Center in Langston School. She has been consistently involved with the Fire Station 8 task force, where she successfully advocated for the station to be rebuilt at its current location. Ms. Jones Kilgo was also a member of the Lee Highway Renaming Working Group, which agreed upon the new name of Langston Brown Boulevard. In addition, she is a member of the Langston Boulevard Alliance, which works to create a more economically vibrant and walkable corridor. Ms. Jones-Kilgo also wrote a proposal and served as program director for the Virginia Humanities Grant that was titled Learn from This Place, Bringing Arlington to Halls Hill. This project worked to present neighborhood history and continue dialogue among the Arlington community about race in Arlington. This is not even to mention the walking tours of Halls Hill that Ms. Jones-Kilgo provides to those interested in learning more about the community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. William Jones-Kilgo.
Good evening, and I want to thank the Human Rights Commission for this award. I also want to thank the person who nominated me. Of course, I want to recognize the board of the John M. Langston Citizens Association, who currently works with me, Marguerite Reed Gooden, Bernard Carpenter, Tom Sitzler, Tanya Graham, Sandra Green, Gary Kirkland, and Jim O'Shea. I always want to recognize my parents, the late George and Ida Bell Jones, who set the example for me in terms of living a life of service. And I want to recognize my 6 siblings, George, Michael, Rosalind, Linwood, Lydia, and Audrey, because without your love, influence, and support, I wouldn't be who I am. But I really want to give props to the John M. Langston Citizens Association, whose members have trusted me to lead them for a few terms. My mom and dad were not civic association leaders. They were worker bees. And at the time that I was kind of growing up on Halls Hill, they worked 2 jobs in order to send my 6 siblings and I to college. But they did contribute and they volunteered where they could. I remember when I was a teen and preteen, my mom and dad would volunteer me to pass out flyers and the like for the Citizens Association because, of course, they were at work. So tonight, I want to shout out just a few of the people within the John M. Langston Citizens Association who are community leaders who positively impacted me when I was growing up in Halls Hill. And the reason I want to do this is because the leaders from the 3 Black neighborhoods, Halls Hill, Highview Park, Johnson's Hill, Arlington View, and Green Valley, did some things back in the time when I was a kid that are the reason that we still know these neighborhoods now. And that had to do with the county conservation program. In early 1964, the federal government had allowed the different states and localities to get access to funding. This funding allowed the Arlington County to address the systemic issues that affected these segregated communities without using their own money, which was the only reason that it actually happened, was because the federal government actually funded it. The Arlington View community actually presented their information first, but they were wonderful in sharing their lessons learned and establishing best practices before those terms were even thought of in terms of the Black communities in order to take access and gain access to this type of funding. So Mrs. Patience Spriggs, who I call my Aunt Pat, one of my mother's best friends, Mr. Bertie Alston, who was the president of the Civic Association in 1964, Mr. James H. Brown, Mr. John Best, Captain George Burke, Mr. E. Leslie Hom Sr., the spouse of Dorothy Hom, Mr. Grant Clark, and Mr. Lewis Williams were the 8 people who were on the committee in Halls Hill who worked on this. Amazingly, by August of 1964, they had achieved the requirement to get 75% of the community involved in this project. They presented it to the County Conservation Committee on November 30th of 1964. On February 13th, 1965, Mr. Bertie Alston, Captain Burke, Mr. Hom, and Patience Spriggs did the presentation, and they were the first neighborhood in Arlington that had their conservation program approved. And that is why, even to this day, well over 50 years later, we know this neighborhood as being a historically African-American neighborhood. And the same goes for Arlington View and for Green Valley. So I want to shout out to those people who taught me how to be a civic activist, to make change and to make things happen. I want to, just as I close, to just shout out a couple of others. Mr. Claude Sweeney, Mr. Ben Moody, Mr. Robert McGregor, Reverend James Brown, Miss Carolyn Whaley, Mrs. Phyllis Cosley, and then a Black woman, the first Black woman who I personally knew, who I saw speak truth to power, Mrs. Lillian Brown. Because of these folks and hundreds of other John M. Langston Citizens Association members over the year, this neighborhood is still known and recognized for the important contributions of these residents. So I want to thank you for the contribution, but I also want to say to our elected officials and the people who support us in the legislation, we appreciate the Langston Boulevard. We appreciate the change in the light logo, but we need real justice. We need real equity. So we need not only the surface recognition, but we need real change in terms of things like teeth in the Civilian Review Board and putting judges up front who support us and who look like us and who are going to be over us. So please stop talking the talk, start walking the walk, because me and my fellow civic activists will be out here to hold you accountable. Thank you again for the recognition, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Wilma, and congratulations to you. And we look forward to partnering with you as well. For our final award of the evening, I'll turn it over to Walt to introduce Arlington Thrive.
Good evening, everyone. I am honored and thrilled to be here today. I want to thank Helen also for presenting the award to Andrew, as I have been out of the country for several months now and thrilled to be back on Arlington soil to do this. In addition, I would like to thank Helen and the committee for having done an amazing job, the Human Rights Office for being devoted to always being there for everyone in the county. Thank you, Gurjeet. Andrew, I want to thank you for such a wonderful organization that you have. Arlington Thrive, an organization created to assist underrepresented and income-challenged Arlington residents. It's aimed to provide same-day emergency financial assistance to residents in financial crisis, which during the pandemic was such a need in our community. Through the guidance and leadership of its current executive director, Andrew Schneider, a native of Arlington County and with substantial experience in the fields of government and politics, he now provides through Arlington Thrive social needed services. Mr. Schneider has been heavily involved with the local government of Arlington County, having at one point run for office as an Arlington County board member. The Human Rights Commission, along with the Human Rights Office, is honored to present the 2021 Human Rights James B. Hunter Award to Arlington Thrive for the excellent work they provide to Arlington County residents and for making sure that all residents have their human rights protected. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Walt, and thank you to the Human Rights Commission for this wonderful honor. And I'm honored to accept this award on behalf of the Thrive staff, our board of directors, and most importantly, on behalf of the men, women, and children that Thrive is able to serve. I'm also honored to be here among so many great honorees and friends, including my safety net colleague, Elizabeth Jones Valderrama, and JD and Wilma, although not totally fair to have to follow either of them. So thank you for that. It is an honor to work with Elizabeth and our safety net colleagues, with a special thanks to Ann Berterberge and the Arlington Community Foundation, who convened the Arlington Safety Net on behalf of all of the people that we serve. And frankly, I'm honored to live and work in a community that has a commitment to helping those in need, in particular our donors and funders and our fellow taxpayers. Thank you to Mr. DiFerrante, both for your remarks tonight and also for your steadfast leadership and passionate work as County Board Chair over the past year. I am grateful personally and on behalf of the Safety Net and as a resident of Arlington for your steadfast and continued leadership. And yet, as we gather here tonight to honor one another and our shared community values, it is vital to also speak with the courage for what we deem to be right and what we know to be wrong. Arlington, where I was raised and raising my own children, is a wonderful place to grow up, to raise a family, and to work. And we're one of the wealthiest counties in the United States, with a median household income over $120,000. And yet there are over 30,000 Arlingtonians living at or near poverty. And 30% of the school children who are attending school in 8 Arlington public schools are on a free or reduced lunch meal plan. And here in Arlington, the smallest county in the United States, the life expectancy of our neighbors can vary by over 10 years depending on where you live in this small community. We are honored, Arlington Thrive is honored to play a role in preventing evictions and financial catastrophe, in particular over the last 18 months during the pandemic. And we are also, as an organization, just like many in the community, are asking ourselves, what else can we do to not only prevent evictions and financial catastrophe, but like Elizabeth said, putting ourselves out of business? What can we be doing alongside our nonprofit colleagues to prevent these crises in the first place? Whether it is access to more affordable childcare, closing the achievement gaps in our schools, or ensuring that where a child lives in Arlington does not preordain how long she may live or how successful her life may be. Thrive is also asking ourselves, what role do we play in perpetuating a system where there are so many have-nots in a county of having so much? Now, we know we did not get here overnight. We are cocooned, all of us, in the legacy of inequity and an entire system that was intentionally designed to prevent equal access to opportunity and maintain unequal outcomes. Knowing this, we know that our work must now be dual focused, twice as important, twice as urgent, and yes, perhaps twice as difficult. We must continue to not only address the immediate manifestations of these inequities and injustices, but at the same time, with the same urgency, continue our work to dismantle the structure that created them in the first place. It will take all of us, the honorees, the leaders, the connected, the disconnected, the haves and the have-nots, to not only honor all that we have done and will continue to do, but to also stand up for what is right, challenging, and uncomfortable. Then, and only then, will we be able to fulfill both the potential and promise of both Mr. Hunter and the accolades for which we are honored here tonight. Arlington Thrive looks forward to continuing this work with each and every one of you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Andrew, and congratulations. And what a nice note to end our evening on, the note that there is much work to do. We heard it from JD, we heard it from Wilma, we heard it from Andrew, and we heard it from Dr. Black. And that is what we as a commission are here to do in partnership with each and every one of you. So I know I mentioned at the outset of the evening that tonight, at least, is one of my favorite evenings of the year. I hope that after hearing what each of you have heard tonight, after learning what each of you have heard tonight, perhaps tonight is also going to become one of your favorite on the calendar each year. So let me close the evening by calling on each and every one of you attending with us in the Facebook, in the YouTube community, to take inspiration, grace, and passion from what you heard tonight, from some of the calls to actions that we heard from JD, from Wilma, from Andrew, from Dr. Black. And I know I certainly will take the lessons and inspirations I heard tonight to craft my agenda of the work we have yet to do as a Human Rights Commission into the year ahead. But I'll do it with a sense of hope and with a sense of purpose, as Pastor Anderson said at the very outset. So thank you all for joining us and spending your evening with us, and a very hearty congratulations to all the awardees. And with that, I wish you all good night.
Good night. I raise cheers to everybody.
Congratulations.
Bye-bye.